Hi students, I'm trying a recorded weekly announcement at the beginning of the week. I'm doing a weekly summary at the end of the week, just for something a little bit different and a change of pace. So this week in our last module before the exam next week, we discussed energy. And there were a host of different resources for you in order to understand the difference between non-renewable, or what we call our traditional sources of energy, things like coal and oil and natural gas and nuclear energy, and then all of our renewables, which also could be called green energy is another way, or clean energy. Sometimes those are the other terms we use for those types of energy. So these are the things that are renewable as long as they're used wisely. So things like hydropower and solar, geothermal, wind, algae biofuels. There's a whole host of different things here. And the idea is to sort of learn the pros and cons, right? So there are always two sides to everything. So as great as our green energy sources are, we know that they don't come without their limitations. And currently, right now, the biggest limitation to really using this type of green technology and green energy is simply we don't have enough supply. And that is something that you probably pretty quickly learned this week when you were doing the lab. So I'll get to that in a moment. But this week, again, I provided just a list of videos for you. Each video was specific to the different type of energy source that was used. So rather than me personally lecturing about each one, you watched a whole series of different videos that were about 2 to 3 minutes long on each. What we had for lab this week, which again could be potentially tricky, was you were looking at how to meet global energy demand each decade. And the idea is that you could control the different mix of energy types that were used so that we could meet future energy demands. And as you saw in the lab, the last part of the lab, where I wanted you to focus on as many renewables as you possibly could, you obviously figured out that it's really, really difficult. Actually, it's impossible to currently meet the world's energy demand based on the green energy infrastructure we have in place right now, which all of that simply means is we have the potential, but we haven't invested in it yet. So we need to invest more in all of these different types of green energy in order to meet global demand. And we can do it, but it's going to take a lot of investment into the infrastructure, and we just haven't seen that yet. So that was sort of part of that challenge, is currently right now, the way things are set, we can't meet global energy demand without also using some of those non-renewable resources to this day. So that was lab for this week. And then we had, of course, as always, your discussion. So thank you, discussion leaders, for posting. There's some really interesting articles this week about energy. For any discussion board that didn't have a discussion leader, I posted an article about using something called agrivoltaics, where instead of seeing great big wind turbines in agricultural fields, there actually could be an alternative, and that would be seeing solar panel arrays in agricultural fields. And in some cases, you could still grow some crops below in and around those solar arrays. So anyways, it's kind of an interesting idea. Also, don't forget that with the exam, you have all of the study materials. So I have the study guides for you and also the study session. So it looks like I haven't had a whole lot of people respond just quite yet, but I know it's still early in the weekend. So depending on how much response I get, that's probably looking like I'm going to hold a session on Tuesday and a session on Wednesday of the exam week. And again, I'll try to hold one in the morning and one in the afternoon to accommodate as many schedules as I can. Speaking of the exam, I will mention this in this week's weekly wrap-up and also in the announcement during the exam week. But there is something a little bit different about the exam this week, and that is that, give me one second here, that is that in addition to seeing your two options that you always see, the traditional option for the traditional exam and option for the essay-only exam. You also have something a little bit different this time. This is an optional assessment, but if you complete it, I will give you 8 points on your exam. So it doesn't matter how you answer them, right or wrong. If you answer them, I'll give you credit. So just a little bit of backstory to this. So Harper College has a series of sort of broad learning goals, things that they want all students to know and all students to learn while they're at Harper. In order to figure out if we're actually teaching to these broader goals, we have to do what are called learning assessments, and they're sort of campus-wide learning assessments. So it's not unique just to biology. You could find this assessment in a whole host of other classes you might be taking. This year, they are testing you as students on your quantitative reasoning. So your ability to look at a graph or a figure or a table and to answer questions about it. So this is an assessment that everyone who's participating in this test, they're all going to see essentially the same questions or the same types of questions. There are 8 questions to answer. It's based on basically 4 figures that you have to look at. And these are going to be graded. So I am grading them. So it is important that you try your best to answer them correctly. I mean, don't panic or don't cause yourself a lot of stress as you're doing this. There's no time limit on it. Take as much time as you want. And please don't stress about it. But also I do want to be transparent and let you know that the college is recording all of this information. Not necessarily in your permanent student record. It's not going to say Jose Martinez answered the quantitative reasoning skills analysis and this is how he answered it. They're not looking individually at individual students. They're just looking at students collectively as a whole, what percentage of students answered these questions correctly and what percentage of students answered them incorrectly. So again, nothing's sort of going to be personally written down for or against you when it comes to this assessment. We're just looking at student performance overall. So again, if you complete this assessment, and again, this is due at the same time as the exam. You don't have to take it on the same day you take your lecture exam. If you want to break them up, that's fine. If you want to do the lecture exam earlier in the week and the quantitative reasoning later in the week, or vice versa even, it really makes no difference to me. I don't need you to do these on the exact same day, but I do have the same deadline. So the deadline still is before midnight on Sunday of exam week. If you're going to take this quantitative assessment, that's when I need you to do it. Okay? So again, hopefully that's a lot of incentive, right? 8 extra points on your exam. So again, that could go a long way for a lot of people in helping to boost your grade if you're at all nervous about this. And remember, right or wrong, doesn't matter how you answer the questions, I'm going to give you 8 points. All right? So just keep that in mind. So that's something just I kind of want to point it out. Last but not least, we're still participating in the Eco Challenge. So just as a reminder, under extra credit here, I have all of the information here about the Eco Challenge. Currently I have, I think like 14 students who are registered for the challenge, but I would say maybe like half of you are participating, which is fantastic. Thank you very much. Remember that as long as you participate in most days of the challenge, which there's 30 days, as long as you participate in 15 of those days and check in, you're going to earn 15 points of extra credit. If you don't do that, you won't receive the credit. So some of you have signed up, but you haven't chosen your challenges yet, and you're not checking in every day. So please make sure that you do sort of that little extra part. Otherwise, it's not going to be worth anything. So again, we're not quite midway through the month. So we will be next week, though, and I want to give everybody that opportunity to earn those extra credit points back. So I think that does it for this. Again, trying something a little bit different, doing a summary versus an intro. So I'm including this in our weekend summary email that I'm sending out to all of y'all. Just sort of going through, again, just as reminders, you guys can send me your study guides. I'd be happy to look over those for you this week. If you do have any questions and can't come to the study sessions themselves, feel free to send me an email. I'll also post recordings of the study sessions like I have in the past. So that's all for now. Good luck with the exam next week. I'll talk to you all later.